Alrighty guys, let's turn this baby on. I just finished the alignment on it and I think it's all set. Let's give it a try, shall we? Remember, this room is awfully noisy. You don't know why, but it is. Tone control.
Grace puts on deposit all of God's goodness on your... The Knesset? The phony media?
Every time I turn on the radio for you guys, Mark Levin is on. I don't understand it. The guy lives on the air, I think. Let's go on down to KSOP. Here we go. KSOP, Classic Country, Salt Lake City, 1370. Right there, about 1370 on the dial. Let's go to 1430. There we go. What's really cool about here is that not only do we have a KSOP, but on KLO 1430, on 1430 they play old-time radio shows all weekend long.
I'll help you find your purse. Oh, but I do not want to put you in trouble. I am perfectly willing to search for the taxes myself.
Honey, the city of New York has gone to a lot of trouble to save you that trouble.
It's kind of cool, isn't it? So I think we're doing well. I've decided that I'm going to just go ahead and solder that speaker back the way it was made because I can't find a good way to make that look natural. And I don't really want to make that look like it doesn't belong. Let me show you how the dial operates when you change bands.
Okay.
See, it just goes up and down. Pretty cool. Now if I go down, I did hear some stuff earlier. Sounded like I was listening to Vietnam. Anyway, if I go down here at this end, there's always a Mexican station or two at this end of the dial.
You know, an extra version of Candy Crush.
There's one. There's the other one. The other one's always real weak because it's not from Salt Lake. Go ahead and put this back on broadcast. I have no idea what the source of that noise is. It drives me crazy.
Forever it seems. U.S. sprinter Justin Gatlin on the finish for Bolt. It's like a nightmare.
All right, here's the top side of the radio. Take a look at the dial with the dial light coming through. Kind of pretty. All the tube voltages are right. They look awfully bright to me, but I checked them. They're all about 6.2 volts, so right on, man, except for that 80. The transformer gets warm but not hot. You look back there, you can see the fuse holder down there. You connect the black wire for the antenna to that ground clip there if you're not using a doublet antenna. If you're using a doublet or a tunable loop, then you connect one side of the loop to that.
You do this. The reason why faith, that shield, that you are...
Alright, let me go ahead and mount the speaker to the board. It'll make it just that much easier to handle. And it's really, there's nothing to it. They just have these 4 screws that have countersunk heads. And the holes in the speaker board are countersunk, so you drop the screws in there. There's 4 of them. Now this curve goes toward the bottom, and I want the output transformer to be toward the bottom also. So go ahead and very carefully lift this up. Now the back of the speaker has actually the front of the speaker has a gasket here that sits against the wood, and it prevents rattling. So I'll go ahead and fit it up over the screws very carefully. You want to be careful so you don't put a screw through the speaker. I've done that before, by the way. Nothing will make you cuss more than that. Now, there's a lock washer that goes on each one. Go ahead and put the nut on there, and I'll mount it up there fairly loosely, all four of them, before I go about tightening any of them. Now I have the speaker all mounted up to the speaker board. And if you look down in there, you can see the gasket for this thing. So let's go ahead and mount this in the radio. Let me show you how that goes. Okay, you see the four studs here. Now that speaker board is just going to come right down on top of that, and then I'll put some nuts down over that to hold it in. No big deal. And you'll notice this little, it's like cardstock in there, and it's clipped to the back of the speaker grill. Now this one clip here kept wanting to poke out, so the fellow that refinished this cabinet opted to pull it out of there. There you go. Just drop that down on there. So there's a washer on each one, flat washer, because the lock washer is going to want to have something to bite into. And so that's why you never use a lock washer against wood. It doesn't do anything for you. In this case, I'm going to use star washers. So put one on each. Go ahead and start the nuts on there. When you buy nut drivers, you want to be real smart and buy good ones. Don't buy the junky Harbor Freight ones, and here's why. You see how this stud here pokes up through the nut? It actually sticks up farther than the Harbor Freight nut drivers are able to fit down over in order to screw it on. Let me show you what I mean. So if you look down in this Harbor Freight nut driver, you see that there's a flat bottom to it. And so there's only so far you can push this thing on before it stops. A good one like this Craftsman that I bought years ago is got a hole in there. It's hollow part way through the shaft. Not all the way. You stick a nail down in there, it'll go down about this far. Let me show you what I mean. Now, it may be a little bit blurry, but you see this here fits down over like that, and I can tighten that. But this Harbor Freight one, it stops. See, it won't go down all the way. And so I can't tighten that nut. So this thing is virtually useless to me once I get more than about 7 or 8 threads engaged on that nut. Okay. Now, let's look at slipping this chassis in there, okay? I'm going to take this 42 out of there and this 80. These two particular tubes tend to work loose sometimes. I don't need them falling. And they're the biggest and most fragile. So if you look at this radio, it's really simple, nothing to it. Nothing to it at all, just 4 screws. Now there's pieces of felt here, but there should be washers to suspend this in that radio cabinet, and I'm going to go ahead and put those in. I've got some. Alright, you see the hole that I have here. It's a little bit small for the big Zenith washers that I usually use, but I have these Philco tuner chassis mount washers that will work out perfectly in here. So you see they'll fit right down in that hole, and you got the nice and flat up top here, and when that squishes down, that'll be just fine. Heck, I could do that too, but that would center it. That would kind of make that nice. But if I lay it down like this, I kind of like that there. That's going to work. I'll put the flat part down. That works out pretty well, actually. So taking this Philco tuner chassis washer, and you lay the flat part here down first into the well of the mount hole. Okay, so it kind of goes down like that. Since this is flat, I don't need to put any washer there. That'll just rest nicely down on the grommet. Let me get this kind of in position. This is always the part I like the least about doing any radio, is getting the chassis in there. It's always a little bit scary to me. All right. So it always the shafts always ride up high in the hole till you get the screws on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to tilt it a little bit to get under it to get the screws started. Make sure the grommets are all in the right places. You don't want to wrench down on it until you totally squish the grommets. These are the antenna wires, better known as the in my way wires from now. And I'll go ahead in a minute here and solder these speaker wires on here. It's a little after 1 in the morning, and respectable people are asleep right now, including Mr. Fred. He'll sit there and he'll watch me work for hours, but he's getting tired and he wants to go to sleep. And he wishes I would turn the lights off. If I would let him stay in here, he'd sleep there all night, but I can't let him stay in here. He'll get into stuff and mess with things. So I'm going to wrap it up for tonight, and I will start up first thing in the morning, finish up putting this radio together. Alrighty guys. I'm going to solder these speaker wires onto the speaker. I did coat them with some low gloss lacquer to freshen up the look a little bit and also to help protect the cloth. So it's something that even the manufacturers did. They used to lacquer coat cloth insulated wire all the time, and that lacquer breaks down over time, and so it's good to refresh it here and there. And this cloth insulated wire looks really good on this radio, so I didn't see any point in replacing it. It gives it a nice original look, which is what I'm kind of after on this radio. That's why I'm not putting a connector on this one. The radio is real open and easy to see everything in there, and so I kind of want it to stay as original looking as possible. Not so much worried about that under the chassis usually, but certainly when we're talking about the stuff people can see, you know, I'll use the commercially available reproduction cloth wire, but it just doesn't look as good as the original stuff did. So I try to stick with it when I can. Because I need to put those together like that. Huh. I don't know where the cardboard insulator went from inside this thing. This is the little cover that goes over the terminals on that speaker. And there's supposed to be a little cardboard insulator in here. Now I thought it was there, but it was also a little bit on the tattered side. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new one. And so I just use standard cardboard. I think this is the divider from cans of cat food inside of a case of cat food. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut one and make it work. All right, fits in there great. I'll just take a knife and real gently score it right here. No, I'm not trying to cut through it, I'm just trying to put a score on it so that when I bend it, it bends right there on that score. All right. Now, I got to make one more. Wifey is upstairs using her brand new juicer, which is pretty cool. The docs recommend that she drink a lot of juice, so that's what she's doing. All right. I have found that these last a whole lot longer and they're less likely to succumb to moisture if I go ahead and put a little lacquer on them. You notice I like to use lacquer. Lacquer's good stuff. I don't know why it's not used much these days. So I'll go ahead and put some lacquer on this. That'll soak into the cardboard, give it some strength, and help it to insulate a little bit better. And keep it from breaking down. Because remember, there's high voltage on these speaker wires. So we kind of want this not to break down. Alright. You don't have to be stingy with the lacquer on this. The cardboard will soak it right up. And then this thing will be pretty sturdy. It'll last a long time. Now while the lacquer is still wet, I'll go ahead and press it in there. And that'll help hold it in. Not that it's going to really need the help. And then in a few minutes I'll go ahead and punch these holes for the screws. Piece of cake, eh? What I like to do is I'll lacquer the inside of it. This will also help prevent it from falling out, because when this lacquer dries it'll take a set in that shape and it'll be less likely to spring out of there if I take it off again. Lacquer's cheap. I love the smell of lacquer. It's like the smell of gasoline, you know. How many of you guys go to a gas station and you're filling up your car and you kind of dig that solvent smell? I know I do. I painted cars for a number of years, and I always liked the smell, even though it's a little strong, and probably a little dangerous to be smelling it. I always liked it. Okay, lacquer's about dry. Yep, feels real good. Let me go ahead and punch these holes. This doesn't have to be anything special, guys. Just don't put your finger behind it as you're poking a knife through it. I've done that too, by the way. Most of the things I warn you against doing are things I've done. So it doesn't, I never pretended to be anybody who's smart. I do stupid, boneheaded things all the time. And this is one of them. Sticking a knife through, cutting a hole like that and poking a hole in my finger is one of those things. Go ahead and push the screws through the holes. And then let's mount them. This little flap right here is just to kind of protect this upper area right here. So you go ahead and you start by making sure that all those wires fit inside that slot there at the bottom. All right, and then you bring it up, kind of get it in place. There we go. You can feel it with the screws. There, perfect. All right, as Arthur Fonzarelli used to say, perfectamundo. First, we'll go ahead and drop the 80 tube back in. That's a pretty tube. I love 80s. They're just gorgeous to look at. Well, that fits up here in the front. All right, let me get an idea where the big pegs are. There we go, 80 is in. I always tell folks when they haul these things home, even if it's a small one like this and it's going to be upright, yank them out of there and set them somewhere safe while you're transporting it, because guaranteed that one of them will fall out and get broken. I don't think I showed you the plug that I set up for this. Of course, this is that reproduction cloth insulated wire, and this is the original, or the plug that came with the radio. This is the plug that came with the radio as I got it. Whether or not it's original to the radio, I'm not sure, but it's a beautiful plug. So I went ahead and reused it. Now, I didn't put a cover on it, and really the cardboard cover that was on these, I'm not really sure what purpose they served, at least not for safety, because you can't really shock yourself unless you have this thing unplugged, because you can't get to those terminals. So I don't know the point. Maybe those little cardboard covers were to keep dust out or dirt out. That could be it. Anyway, they always fall out, so I'm just leaving it out. I can always make one for the owner, no big deal, but they're always falling out, so I'll just leave it. It's a nice, clean-looking plug. Now, I did put like a square knot, or actually it's more like a UL knot right in here. It's hard to see down in there, but I put a UL knot in there to act as a strain relief. When I pull the cord, it won't pull on where it's attached. Okay, and then I also like to put, because you strip back this cloth covering, this synthetic cloth covering, and the stuff wants to unravel. It unweaves itself, and it makes a mess. So what I do before I cut it off, once I've kind of pulled it back a little, I put a piece of clear shrink tubing on there. It gives it a nice clean look, and it has the added benefit of that shrink tubing is not as flexible, so it's not going to flex. It's not going to cause as much strain on the terminals or the wire right close to the terminals. So it kind of strengthens that, gives it a little strain relief. Okay, so this thing is all ready to use. I'm going to go ahead and plug it in now. Before I do that, let me go ahead and dress these up with a little bit of Howard's Restore. I'm not going to do much here. I just want to kind of clean these little knobs up. They are wooden knobs. They have been lacquered, so it's perfect application for Howard Restore. The thing I love about this stuff is that it cleans as well as colors and dresses it, so that's a good thing. I think I cut my felt just a little bit too small. Oh well. The thing to remember about Howard's Restore is that you don't want to let it dry all the way before you wipe it off. Okay. Yes, this is a pair of my old underwear, so if you're a sensitive one, don't look. Alright, nothing fancy, just cleaning them up a bit. That groove collects dust down in there, and that's a good place for this Restore to go clean it up. Oh. The knobs do get slippery when they have this stuff on them. So if you're going to be working indoors, just make sure it's in a place where if you drop it, you're not going to make any marks on the floor that you care about. This is the old beat up carpeting that was in the house when I moved in, and I know I'm going to replace it someday, but that day is not today. And in the meantime, I don't care about this carpeting too much. I don't want it to smell, and I don't want it to be filthy, but I don't care if it gets a little bit of Howard Restore on it. Okay, grab the undies and wipe away. That sounded kind of weird, didn't it? Well, it's just you and me. You don't have to tell anybody. People knew half the things I said, they'd probably lock me up. Alright, now that knob looks a little better. Nice and clean. Let's get this one. It's been harder than hell to stay on camera today. I don't know why. Alright, nice and clean. Okay, let's get the radio up on the bench. Alright guys, so These are an absolute must. You really have to put these on just about every radio you do. Not every radio, but pretty close. These little felt washers. Now I wish they were a little thicker, but this is what I can get. And I buy these at Radio Days. And you just put them over the shafts and they give it a finished look, and they also prevent the knobs from wearing on the lacquer finish. If you wear through the lacquer finish, moisture gets in and it causes finish around it to begin to deteriorate. So you want to try to keep that from happening. Alright, let's put these knobs on. Two of the knobs have that little half moon design like that. They might not be original, it's hard to say. Alright. The other two have the set screw design like that. This has a flat that the set screw screws into. There we go. Sometimes knobs or shafts have a flat and sometimes they don't when you're using set screws. And then finally, this little guy here. And if I remember right, that set screw goes down in this little V groove right here. Okay. So let's lock that in position. Now this is scutcheon. It's just a little dirty. It's not, I'm not going to do anything to remove that patina, but I am going to wash it with some real mild soap and water. So let me do that and I'll bring it right back. You see that tiny screw? You want to get the right screwdriver. So I like to use these little electrician screwdrivers. They're real nice because they have a pivot. They have a pivot up there at the top so I can put it against my palm as I'm operating it. Of course, at this stage, I'm all thumbs, man, because I'm worried about damaging the radio after all this work. I always use a finger to guide the screwdriver so that I don't slip and wind up tearing up something. Whew. That's always the hardest one, man, that first one. This screw has seen better days. But if I put a new one on there, it'll stand out like a sore thumb. Well, I think a new one's going to have to be what I do. If it looks too odd, then I'll just have to go ahead and patina it with some acid. I cannot tell you how many times my finger has slipped off, or the screwdriver has slipped off and I've made a gouge in the wood. I don't want to do that on this radio. If you over tighten these, you will strip the wood, you will tear the wood up and it'll strip it. So, alright, so I want to show you something. This is a brand new brass screw. That is going to stand out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to go upstairs and talk to Wifey, who makes jewelry, and see if she can patina this. And if she can, I'll tell you what she used. Okay, Wifey just took a little mini butane torch and just took the edge off on this screw. And what's going to happen now is that even if it was lacquer coated, it removed that too. And it won't take long at all, and this thing will patina itself. But it already looks quite a bit better than the brand new brass. So I'll go ahead and install it on here now. It isn't quite there yet. It still looks different than the other ones, but it will only be a matter of a few weeks, and that will be looking just like the other ones. Never ever screw things on when you're this close to the finished cabinet without kind of protecting the rest of the surface. There's some lacquer in that hole, and this screw is a little bit bigger than the original, so it's fitting a little tight. That's actually not bad. It'll stay in there. Just want to be real careful as I'm putting it in. Okay, there we go. Scutcheon's all put on. Pretty much everything's done. So I'm ready to back up now and show you the radio. Let me set that up. Well, all right, guys, here she is. 1934 Stewart-Warner Model 1262 with the R126A chassis. Turned out pretty well, I think. Looks real good. I think that the guy that owns this radio is going to love it, man. Let's turn it on and see how she sounds.
Short of me saying, please, if you don't this cut, can you make sure you have it? Short of that, do I ever say anything to you? Ever?
No, I don't know where my office is, but I don't mind because you don't bother me at all.
Now that doesn't bug me because when I go upstairs, that is going to come in a lot better. That's just the way it is. I'm in a basement. There's about half of my basement, about this high up, is concrete. And I'm actually above ground where I'm at because it's a walkout basement, but it's concrete. And there's, there are two air conditioners right here and an awful lot of wiring, 240 volt wiring right above us. So that's probably the source of the noise. It's probably the reason for the difficulty in getting signal. So anyway, let me show you a little bit about how this looks in terms of the tuning.
We're all busy up until the second we go on the air. We've got a sense of urgency. Have food delivered, which you can have anything delivered in New York. Nobody has to leave their desk, and they keep working while they're eating. I don't even eat.
All right, let's tune down to what's used to be called the police band.
Yeah.
All right, that's police band. Won't get much there right now. There we go. See, that's a really weak station, and that's when the tunable loop helps. But unfortunately, tunable loop will not help much on shortwave. Once I get past about, I don't know, 2 megahertz or so. So let's put it down now to the next shortwave band. I'm not going to get anything with this antenna attached. I'd have to have a long antenna, but I did do that last night. And then there's the final band right there, and that goes from that goes from 11 to 22 megahertz. This one goes from 4.5 to looks like about 13 megahertz. This one goes from 1750 kilohertz to right about 5 megahertz. Of course, there's your broadcast. All right, let's take a last look at this thing. I'll leave it on 570. There's the tunable loop. It is pretty noisy, and there's actually a little bit of bad weather going on outside too. Let's take a look inside there and see what we see. About as simple a radio as you can get.
I honestly don't understand some of these Republicans. And
there's that 42. There up there is that pretty 80.
There was an article on drugs today. Back home, Paul Ryan can't escape questions about Republicans.
Got a fuse holder right here. To replace this fuse, you would just turn this thing counterclockwise and pop it out. Put the fuse in the cap. Put a new fuse in the cap, and then reverse the process to put it back in. The blue wire is the antenna wire, and the black wire down here is the antenna ground. Okay, right now they're both connected to the tunable loop, which is how it needs to be for a tunable loop. If you're using a single, like a dipole antenna, you just take the blue wire and connect it to your antenna lead, and you take the black wire and connect it right here to this ground clip, and that's all you have to do. And it's better if you can ground the chassis. That's a good thing. Here are the controls. This is the volume. The power is not on the volume control. The power is on the tone control. Okay, the band switch is right here. And if you look up here at the band indicator, you see it moves when you operate the band switch. Okay, and then of course this is the tuning. Let's go find another station. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up for this 1934 Stewart-Warner Model 1262. It's been a fun little set, couple little issues. Oh, listen to this, one of the best songs ever, man. All right, guys, I think I'll wrap it up to the background music of this beautiful song. Always been one of my favorites. So I'm glad I'm done with this Stewart-Warner. Never worked on a Stewart-Warner before. It's been kind of a neat radio. It's been challenging at times, but it sure is pretty, and I'm pretty sure the owner's going to like it. So I'll wrap it up, and from your Western Outpost in Salt Lake City, this is Michael. And that's all for now.